Number 1. The Vera Island Monolith. Lake Turgoyak sits in the southern Urals near the city of Mias, Chelyabinsk, Oblast, Russia. When the water level drops, a natural dam emerges and connects Vera Island to the mainland. That periodic connection is likely how the builders accessed the site. They chose a place that would isolate itself again once the water rose. The geological formations beneath the island are between 250 and 300 million years old. What sits on top of them is far younger, but still remarkable. The complex dates to the Neolithic period, the mid-4th to 3rd millennium BC, making it roughly 5,000 to 6,000 years old. Stanislav Grigoriev of the Russian Academy of Sciences confirmed this range through stone tool analysis, placing activity between 4,000 and 2,000 BCE. For context, that overlaps with the earliest phases of Stonehenge and predates the Great Pyramid by centuries. Megalith 1 is the centerpiece. It measures 19 meters long by 6 meters wide. It is oriented west to east. The construction method is dry masonry cut directly into the bedrock, then covered with megalithic capstones. The largest single capstone weighs approximately 17 tons. To move that today, you would need a mid-size mobile crane, the kind used in commercial construction. Inside, there is a long corridor leading to a central hall with 2 chambers, one to the west, one to the north, connected by an additional corridor. Ceiling heights reach at least 1.9 meters and often exceed 2 meters. The interior contains windows and carved sculptures of bulls and wolves. Megalith 2 is integrated into a rocky slope. It measures approximately 7.5 by 3.5 meters and contains 2 chambers, each 1.7 meters high, connected by a corridor. A system of niches and shelves lines the walls. Researchers believe these held ritual objects. Megalith 3 involves boulders weighing at least 14 to 15 tons. Between them, a square pit was cut into bedrock. Vertical stone slabs close both sides with massive boulder capstones prepared on top. Then there is Vera Island 9, a cultic ritual place. 2 menhirs stand oriented west to east. 2 fireplaces sit nearby. A large altar stone anchors the arrangement, and a larger menhir marks the direction of sunset at midwinter. This connects the complex to a solar calendar cult. The stone rows near the megaliths follow an east-west orientation, with the most massive stones placed centrally, forming the core of each composition. The oldest samples of stone sculpture in the entire Urals were found within this complex. That is significant because the broader Sverdlovsk Oblast contains over 200 dolmens. This was not an isolated effort. Someone was building across the region. Here's the core anomaly. European megalith builders had agriculture. They had demographic density. The Urals had neither. Against a background of no farming, there was no demographic basis for this megalithic phenomenon. The people here were semi-nomadic hunter-gatherers. The mainstream theory holds that these groups organized labor on a smaller scale than European farming societies, possibly assembling work teams over generations to build a seasonal ritual center. That is plausible, but not proven. A more ambitious archaeological theory frames the complex as a lost cultural tradition connected to broader Eurasian megalithic exchange networks that have not yet been mapped. The fringe interpretation pushes the dating back further, claiming the site belongs to a pre-flood or pre-Ice Age civilization with advanced astronomical knowledge. The midwinter sunset alignment is cited as the key evidence. What is certain is that the complex combines temple, burial site, observatory, and ritual space within just 6 hectares. Formal protection only came after excavations led by Yulia Vasina between 2004 and 2007, at which point Vera Island received cultural heritage status. Since then, uncontrolled tourism has damaged the monuments. Many are now in unsafe condition. Nearly no English-language research existed until Grigoriev and Vasini published their monograph through Archaea Press in 2019. The Urals were simply not where anyone expected to find megaliths. No written tradition survived. No continuity of habitation preserved the memory. The sophistication of what was built sits in direct tension with the apparent simplicity of who built it. That tension is going to recur at every site from here forward. But the next monolith is not hidden on an island in the Urals. It sits on a hilltop in plain sight, in one of the most historically documented countries on Earth, and nobody can explain how it was made. Number 2. Masuda-no-Iwafune. In Nara Prefecture, Japan, near Okadera Station in the city of Kashihara, A single granite block sits on the summit of a forested hill. It is 11 meters long, 8 meters wide, 4.7 meters high, and weighs approximately 800 tons. That is roughly the weight of 5 fully loaded Boeing 737 aircraft. The upper surface is completely flat. 2 square holes, each about 1 meter across, are carved into it. A ridgeline runs parallel to both holes across the top. At the base of the stone, lattice-shaped indentations mark the surface. These are believed to relate to whatever process the builders used to flatten the sides. The stone is granite, one of the hardest materials to work, yet a three-dimensional measurement survey conducted between 2005 and 2006 by the Takasago City Council and the University of Otimai found no clear tool marks. Someone shaped 800 tons of extremely hard stone and left no identifiable trace of how they did it. The dating is contextual, not absolute. The carving technique appears to belong to the end of the Kofun period, around the 7th century AD. No inscriptions exist, no direct records survive. The scale-like carvings on the side resemble the stonework of the nearby Kami-ishi, turtle stone in Asuka, connecting it to a broader tradition of enigmatic stone carving in the region. The village of Asuka alone contains at least 20 other carved stone monuments of unknown origin and purpose. There is astronomical evidence. The ridgeline across the top runs parallel to the mountain ridge and aligns with sunset on what is called Spring Doyu Entry, a date that signals the beginning of the agricultural season in the ancient lunar calendar. If that alignment is intentional, the stone functioned as a seasonal marker. The 2 holes are asymmetric. Only one retains water after rain. The other has a crack, which may have been the reason the project was abandoned. This parallels the Unfinished Obelisk in Egypt, a monument we will reach later. There is also a prism-shaped protuberance on one vertical side, which suggests the object may rest on its side. It may be an incomplete, overturned work. Beneath the monolith sits a stone tank shaped like a tray. According to temple records, the water within it never dries up, even during the long droughts. The name itself, Iwafune, literally means rock ship. The boat-like shape and proximity to the now-drained Lake Masuda likely inspired the name. A Shinto temple was built next to it because locals have considered the stone divine since ancient times. The Ishino-Hoden megalith in Hyogo Prefecture features similar squared holes and flattened surfaces. This suggests a shared but unknown tradition between sites separated by considerable distance. The mainstream theory is that the stone served as an astronomical observation point, tracking seasonal agricultural dates. This is the most popular interpretation, but contested by specialists. The archaeological alternative connects it to onmyudu, the ancient Japanese practice of yin-yang cosmology and celestial observation, framing the stone as a ritual instrument rather than a practical tool. The fringe theory points to the absence of identifiable tool marks and argues that the precision of the shaping suggests a lost technology that predates the Kofun attribution. No written records describe the construction. The carving style predates later Buddhist sculpture traditions. Very little has been published in English. It remains almost unknown outside Japan. While this monolith sits on a hilltop in full view, the next one was hidden beneath 40 meters of Mediterranean seawater for over 9,000 years. Number 3, the Pantelleria Vecchia Bank Monolith. In 2015, a submerged monolith was found at a depth of about 130 feet off the coast of Sicily. It is 12 meters long, weighs about 15 tons, and is broken into 2 parts. The discoverers were Emanuele Lodolo and Zvi Ben Avraham, who found it during a seafloor mapping survey of the Pantelleria Vecchia Bank, about 60 kilometers south of Sicily. Seawater inundated the Pantelleria Vecchia Bank at 9,350 years before present, plus or minus 200 years. That makes the monolith at least that old. The submersion presumably forced its inhabitants to migrate. 3 regular holes of similar diameter mark the stone. One crosses completely through the top. 2 others are on the sides. The researchers stated there are no reasonable known natural processes that may produce these elements. The composition is calcarudites of late Pleistocene age, determined from radiocarbon measurements on shell fragments extracted from rock samples. The survey used high-resolution bathymetric mapping with multi-beam sonar systems, complemented by diver observations, rock sampling, and approximately 8 hours of high-definition underwater video. Before submersion, the area was an archipelago with a string of islands linking Europe to North Africa via a shallow sea. This was not open ocean. It was a navigable landscape. two enigmatic rectilinear ridges were found nearby. One is 820 meters long, the other is 82 meters long. They are arranged perpendicular to each other. Ridge 1 is precisely 10 times longer than Ridge 2. Both sit at the same depth yet are composed of rocks of different ages. Their steep seaward slopes cannot be easily explained by natural causes. The monolith was quarried from a rocky outcrop located roughly 300 meters from where it was found. That confirms deliberate transport. Lodolo and Ben Avraham concluded that the belief our ancestors lacked the knowledge, skill, and technology to exploit marine resources or make sea crossings must be progressively abandoned. A subsequent study re-examined the site and concluded the features may represent natural outcrops shaped by erosional processes. The debate remains unresolved. No definitive follow-up has been funded. The only comparable submerged Mediterranean site is Atlit Yam, off northern Israel, dated between 8,900 and 8,300 years before present. Function remains speculative. Experts have suggested a primitive lighthouse, a local beacon, or a place to anchor fishing boats. None is confirmed. Whether the monolith originally stood upright or was always horizontal is unknown. For geographic context, the site sits roughly 25 miles from Malta, whose own megalithic temples date to 3600 BC. The Sicilian Channel monolith is roughly 4,000 years older. The mainstream theory holds that Mesolithic peoples quarried and moved the stone for practical coastal purposes, demonstrating unexpected but not impossible capability. The archaeological theory suggests the monolith and ridges represent a more organized settlement infrastructure than previously attributed to Mesolithic Mediterranean cultures. The fringe theory points to the precise 10-to-1 ratio of the ridges and the regular holes as evidence of a deliberate measurement system used by a civilization whose sophistication has been vastly underestimated or erased by rising seas. What the monolith suggests is that Mesolithic peoples in the central Mediterranean were far more capable than previously believed, and rising sea levels may have swallowed far more evidence than we realize. But if the Pantelleria Vecchia monolith is debated, the next site is outright polarizing. And the reason is scale. Number 4. The Gornaya Shoria monoliths. Deep in the Siberian mountains of Gornaya Shoria lies one of the most remote and inaccessible mountain regions in Russia. No roads lead directly to the site. Reaching it requires multi-day expeditions on foot. The claim is extraordinary. Researchers found what appear to be supermassive blocks of stone weighing over 1,000 tons. Preliminary studies suggest some blocks weigh between 3,000 and 4,000 tons. If accurate, that is 2 to 3 times larger than the largest known megaliths anywhere on Earth. Some blocks appear stacked up to 40 meters high, displaying flat surfaces, right angles, and sharp corners resembling Cyclopean masonry. The site was first found and photographed by Georgy Sidorov and explored for the first time in 2013. During one expedition, geologists reported a magnetic anomaly. Their compasses behaved strangely near the megaliths, with arrows deviating from expected readings. The cause is unknown. The anomaly has never been formally studied or replicated under controlled conditions. The geological composition is Precambrian basement granite, hundreds of millions of years old, displaying horizontal layering with vertical jointing. This pattern is the center of the debate. It is consistent with either natural frost wedging in granite or deliberate stacking. Nobody has been there long enough to determine which. No formal archaeological excavation has ever been conducted. All assessments are based on surface photography and brief geological surveys. No artifacts, tool marks, quarry sites, or other signs of human activity have been found nearby. The region has no known megalithic building tradition of any kind. The extreme altitude and latitude mean the site would have been under or adjacent to glacial ice during the last ice age. The mainstream position is straightforward. Natural columnar jointing and frost weathering in granite can produce flat faces and right angles, particularly in extreme Siberian freeze-thaw cycles. Many experts who have reviewed the images but not visited the site describe it as a natural geological formation. The archaeological counter-argument is that the concentration, regularity, and apparent stacking pattern exceed what natural processes typically produce, and that the site warrants formal investigation before dismissal. The fringe interpretation identifies the blocks as remnants of a pre-Ice Age construction by an unknown civilization, citing the magnetic anomaly and the sheer scale. Mainstream geology treats the site as natural until proven otherwise. But no institution has funded a proper investigation. If these formations are artificial, they would be the largest worked stones on Earth by a factor of 2 or 3. If they are natural, they are among the most geometrically striking frost-weathering formations ever documented. Either answer would be significant. The site's inaccessibility is itself a data point. Whatever produced these formations did so in a place that is nearly impossible to reach even today. From Siberian ambiguity, we turn to a site where the split is visible, famous, and still unexplained. Number 5. Al-Naslaa. At the Tepe oasis in Saudi Arabia stands a formation that has become one of the most shared geological images on social media in recent years. 2 huge symmetrical stone blocks sit on small natural pedestals. They are roughly 20 feet tall and 30 feet wide. Between them runs a narrow, clean slit that looks almost as if sliced with a laser. Tepe is the site of Saudi Arabia's oldest known human settlement. It sat on a major trade route in antiquity. The Babylonian king Nabonidus once dwelt here. The site is referenced in both Assyrian and biblical sources. The megalith was first documented in 1883 by explorer Charles Hoover. Ancient petroglyphs cover the surface. They depict Arabian horses, ibexes, and humans. The horse petroglyph resembles an Arabian breed, making it potentially one of the earliest depictions of that breed. 3 theories compete to explain the split. The first is tectonic. A sudden movement of Earth's crust fractured the sandstone. The second is a natural joint, where rock breaks apart without displacement. Joints commonly produce unusually straight fractures in sandstone. The third involves freeze-thaw cycles. Water freezing and expanding in small cracks eventually join together and open the straight gap visible today. The pedestals are natural mushroom rocks. Winds blow faster, close to the ground, eroding the base more quickly than the top. The stone is sandstone, layered and relatively fragile compared to granite. Wind-carrying abrasive sand particles could have polished the fracture surfaces smooth over millennia. No tool marks or signs of intentional cutting have been formally documented on the split faces. The overall shape results from wind erosion and chemical weathering. The petroglyphs suggest human presence going back at least 4,000 years, though the rock formation is far older. The region experiences occasional seismic activity, which makes the continued balance on those narrow pedestals remarkable. The mainstream theory is that this is entirely natural. A combination of jointing, freeze-thaw, and aeolian erosion over geological timescales explains everything visible. The archaeological alternative suggests the site held ritual or navigational significance, and that ancient peoples may have enhanced or maintained the split as a sacred landmark. The fringe theory claims the precision implies intentional shaping by an unknown technology. Despite its viral fame, no comprehensive scientific study has been published specifically on the split mechanism. Social media attention and scientific attention are not the same thing. From a crack we cannot fully explain, we move to a quarry stone so large that even the intention behind it raises questions. Number 6. The Forgotten Stone of Baalbek. In 2014, the Oriental Department of the German Archaeological Institute made a discovery in the quarry at Baalbek in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley. They found a stone block 55 feet long, 20 feet wide, and 18 feet high. It weighs at least 1,650 tons. It is the largest stone ever quarried by human hands in recorded history. It was found buried next to the stone of the pregnant woman, estimated at 1,000 tons, and near the stone of the south, approximately 1,242 tons. All 3 sit in the same quarry. The block was most certainly being readied for transportation without being cut further, based on its configuration and level of smoothness. To grasp the scale, the trilithon, the 3 massive stones in the Temple of Jupiter's foundation, each weigh an estimated 750 to 800 tons. They sit 18 to 20 feet above the ground level. That means they were not just moved horizontally, but lifted vertically. The quarry sits uphill from the temple complex, meaning transport would have been downhill. That reduces but does not eliminate the challenge. Conventional scholarship attributes the quarrying to the 1st century BC Roman construction program, but no Roman-era documents describe the methods used. No rollers, ramps, or transport infrastructure of sufficient scale have been found at the quarry site. The precision of the cuts on all three quarry monoliths suggests a systematic, industrialized approach to stone extraction. For modern comparison, the largest modern cranes can lift roughly 20,000 tons. So the weight is within modern capability, but routinely, moving 1,650-ton monoliths, positioning them precisely, and raising them vertically remains an extraordinary engineering challenge even today. It would require extensive planning, custom equipment, and careful ground preparation. Baalbek sits at roughly 3,800 feet elevation. The region has been continuously inhabited for at least 9,000 years. Local legend attributes the original platform to Cain or to giants. The Arabic name links it to pre-Roman Phoenician worship of Baal. The German Archaeological Institute's excavation was specifically aimed at understanding mining techniques. It raised more questions than it answered. The Forgotten Stone proves the quarriers had even greater ambitions than the Trilithon. They were scaling up, not down. There were no evolutionary steps leading to this. Or, if there were, we have not found them. The mainstream theory invokes Roman engineers using coordinated labor forces, sledges, rollers, and capstan systems. This is consistent with known Roman capabilities at extreme scale. The archaeological counter-argument contests the Roman attribution entirely, suggesting the megalithic foundation predates Roman construction by thousands of years, with Romans building their temple on top of a pre-existing platform. The fringe theory argues the scale exceeds any known ancient transport capability and points to lost technologies, including acoustic levitation or geopolymer casting. No Roman account describes the process. The quarry was buried. The pre-Roman history was overridden by successive civilizations. The stone remains in the quarry, available for study. From the largest stone ever quarried, we move to statues scattered across a remote Indonesian valley that no known civilization claims. Number 7. The Bada Valley statues. Inside Lore Lindu National Park in central Sulawesi, Indonesia, statues are spread across the Bada, Besoa, and Napu valleys. Reaching them requires a multi-hour drive on rough roads from Palu, the provincial capital. The estimated age is at least 5,000 years, but the timeline is complicated. Dutch researcher Albert Christian Kruit noted that before the Dutch arrived in 1908, people in the area still made stone tombs and kalambas. Some objects may be only a few hundred years old. Others are millennia older. A living tradition was still operating when colonists disrupted it. The statues are anthropomorphic, the faces are stylized. Eyebrows and nose form one continuous line. Mouths are omitted entirely. The heads are large, the bodies have no curves and no legs. Male genitalia are carved on some. Female genitalia appear on others. Gender differences are also reflected in the facial features. Palindo is the most famous statue. It stands with a visible phallus and an expression that has been described as a smirk. It is the most visited monolith in the valley. The kalambas are massive cylindrical stone containers, often accompanied by ornate lids featuring intricate carvings of geometric patterns. They are unlike any other artifacts in Southeast Asia. Whether they served as burial vessels, storage containers, or ritual objects remains unconfirmed. Local beliefs hold that the stones have supernatural powers. They can disappear or move on their own. The figure, called Tokala'ia, is said to have been a rapist cursed to become stone. Tadulako was a village guardian who stole rice and was cursed. The parallel to Göbekli Tepe is worth noting. Both display sophisticated understanding of human and symbolic representation. Neither provides evidence of permanent settlements from their respective eras. The valley sits at significant elevation, surrounded by hills where clouds often collect at the summits. No written records, tool caches, or quarry sites have been conclusively linked to the statue building culture. The civilization that created these monoliths has no confirmed name, no confirmed language, and no confirmed connection to any known civilization. The mainstream theory identifies the statues as products of a local ancestor worship tradition that persisted in various forms for millennia. The archaeological alternative suggests stylistic similarities to Göbekli Tepe and other Neolithic sites point to a much older shared symbolic tradition that crossed continents, possibly via maritime routes. The fringe theory frames the statues as remnants of a lost global civilization that left similar monumental forms across unconnected regions. Stone reliefs of wildlife and carved stone plates were also common across the valley, indicating a broader artistic tradition beyond statuary. The site has received minimal excavation, conservation, or international attention. What has been found challenges assumptions about Neolithic Indonesia. From a valley of unknown faces, we go to a desert that once held seasonal lakes and the oldest astronomical observatory in Africa. Number 8. The Nabta Playa Monoliths. Approximately 100 kilometers west of Abu Simbel in southern Egypt, in what is now one of the most inhospitable deserts on Earth, sits Nabta Playa. It receives virtually zero annual rainfall today. It was not always this way. The site was first found in 1974 by a team led by Fred Wendorf, an anthropology professor from Southern Methodist University. Archaeological evidence suggests the first arrivals came between 11,000 and 9,300 years ago. Around 10,000 BC, a climatic shift caused by a northward movement of the summer monsoons brought enough rainfall to fill dry lakes for at least several months each year. Seasonal grasslands appeared. Between 8,000 and 7,000 years ago, two major droughts forced abandonment. After a roughly 1,000-year hiatus, a more complex society returned. Over several thousand years, the people of Nabta Playa constructed stone circles, underground tombs, huge stone slabs, and rows of stelae extending over about 2,500 meters. The stone circle contains two pairs of stone slabs. One pair marks north. The other marks the position of the rising sun on the summer solstice. 6 further upright slabs are set along two lines whose astronomical purpose remains debated. Thomas G. Brophy proposed that 3 southern stones represented the stars of Orion's belt, and that another 3 represented Orion's head and shoulders. His interpretation is contested but has drawn serious attention. The stone circle was erected around 4800 BC to mark the summer solstice. Further megalithic structures followed until around 3600 BC. The Valley of Sacrifices contains 10 identifiable mounds of broken sandstone blocks covering subterranean chambers. Inside are articulated remains of cattle, goats, and sheep. The largest chamber holds an entire cow in an elaborate space covered by a tamarisk roof. These cattle burials suggest a society practicing ritual sacrifice and valuing livestock as sacred. That pattern is consistent with pre-dynastic Egyptian religious themes. During summer and autumn months, the complex would have been partially submerged by seasonal flooding. That may have been an important aspect of its symbolic geometry. The standing stones are rough-hewn sandstone slabs not dressed or polished, but their placement demonstrates precise astronomical knowledge. Some researchers argue Nabta Playa's builders were the precursor civilization to the First Nile dynasties. The Gebel Ramlah cemetery, with rich burials dated to around 4400 BC, is associated with the prehistoric herdsmen who likely built the stone circle. The site predates Stonehenge by roughly 2,000 years, and the Great Pyramid by roughly 3,000 years. No comparable astronomical system existed in Egypt at the time. The mainstream theory holds that semi-nomadic pastoralists used the stone circle as a seasonal calendar to track monsoon arrival and coordinate herding. The astronomical function was practical, not mystical. The archaeological alternative argues the complexity of the site suggests a proto-state level of social organization that directly fed into early Egyptian civilization. The fringe interpretation takes Brophy's Orion correlations as evidence of a much deeper astronomical tradition, possibly inherited from an even older civilization. Nabta Playa represents the oldest known evidence of deliberate celestial observation in Africa. But it is not the only site in Egypt that reveals how ancient builders worked. In the quarries at Aswan, Egyptian ambition met its physical limit and froze there. Number 9. The Unfinished Obelisk. The Aswan quarries contain the recognizable pink to reddish-pink, coarse-grained rose granite used throughout ancient Egypt. Inside those quarries lies the largest obelisk ever attempted. If completed, it would have stood approximately 42 meters tall, about 137 feet, and weighed nearly 1,200 tons. It was never finished. It remains partially attached to the bedrock on its underside. A crack appeared during the carving process. The crack runs through the middle third and is visible today. The project stopped. The obelisk was abandoned in place. The carving process used dolerite, a rock harder than granite, pounded repeatedly against the surface to chip away material. Workers trenched channels around the obelisk to isolate it from the surrounding rock. The trench width was roughly the width of a person. Workers crouched in these narrow channels, pounding dolerite balls for months. Experimental archaeology has shown dolerite removes granite at approximately 5 millimeters per hour. The trenching alone would have taken many months with the large teams. The obelisk is attributed to Hatshepsut, 18th dynasty, roughly 1478 to 1458 BC. No definitive inscription confirms this. It was intended as a companion piece to the Lateran obelisk, now standing in Rome at 32 meters tall and 455 tons. The unfinished obelisk was meant to be 30% taller. Completed obelisks were transported down the Nile on specially built barges. Some are depicted in reliefs at Deir el-Bahari. No pulley systems appear in Egyptian art. The accepted transport theory involves ramps, sledges, and water-lubricated sand. Approximately 200 quarry sites have been identified across Egypt, the majority along the Nile. They were worked during periods of strong royal power, requiring significant logistical organization. This was a state-level enterprise. The rose granite from Aswan was transported over 800 kilometers for Khufu's sarcophagus chamber at Giza. The confidence to attempt a 1,200-ton single-piece obelisk implies the Egyptians had successfully completed similar projects before. There may be lost obelisks of comparable scale. The evolutionary steps leading to this attempt would have included smaller obelisks, incremental increases in size, and accumulated knowledge of where granite would crack and where it would hold. The unfinished obelisk shows where that progression finally exceeded the stone's structural limits. The mainstream theory credits well-organized Egyptian state labor using dolerite tools, copper saws, ramps, sledges, and Nile barges. Slow, dangerous, labor-intensive, but within known capabilities. The archaeological alternative frames the attempt as competitive escalation among pharaohs, each trying to surpass their predecessor. The fringe theory argues that dolerite pounding alone cannot account for the precision seen in completed obelisks and proposes unknown cutting techniques, possibly involving heated quartz sand or acoustic resonance. The quarrying tradition ended with the decline of pharaonic power. No technical manual survives. What we know comes entirely from tool marks, experiments, and reliefs. The quarry is now an open-air museum. The unfinished obelisk provides more information about Egyptian quarrying than any completed monument precisely because the process was frozen mid-execution. From a civilization whose methods we can partially reconstruct, we end with a site in Turkey that is rewriting the timeline of civilization itself. Number 10. The Karahan Tepe Monolithic Pillars. Karahan Tepe is a pre-pottery Neolithic site dating to between 10,000 and 9,500 BCE. It is located near Yamurlu, roughly 46 kilometers east of Göbekli Tepe. It is often called its sister site. The claim is significant. It may be the earliest known human village where sacred and secular spaces were built simultaneously, and humans dwelled year-round for about 1,500 years. No remnants of farmed vegetation have been found. These people settled before agriculture. That inverts the standard model, which holds that farming surplus enabled permanent settlement and monumental construction. Karahan Tepe suggests the motivation came first. The food production followed. The site was found in 1997 by Bahaddin Khalik of Haran University. As of 2023, only about 5% of the surface has been excavated. The site covers almost 10 hectares, 15 including quarries. 617 small finds and 274 architectural finds have been catalogued. 266 of those are in situ T-shaped pillars. In September 2023, a new enclosure revealed a statue standing 7 feet 6 inches tall, about 2.3 meters. It is the world's earliest known example of a realistic human depiction. The figure is naked, grasping its phallus with both hands. Fingers and ribs are indicated by deep scratch lines. A V-shaped collar encircles the neck. A vulture sculpture and carved stone plates were found in the same enclosure, placed as if marking an important ritual space. T-topped columns were carved directly into the bedrock. They have been described as phallic totems. They survived because the site was filled with dirt and rubble at some point in antiquity. The inhabitants deliberately buried their temples. Lead archaeologist Nekmi Karul framed it this way. They buried the buildings as you would bury a person who has died. Karahan Tepe is home to the oldest winter solstice alignment ever recorded. Stone reliefs throughout the site depict wildlife ranging from insects to mammals, including attacking beasts gripping men's heads. Carroll's broader interpretation is that as communities became more sedentary, they placed the human figure and experience at the center of the universe. That philosophical shift is visible in the material record. The 7-foot statue is not decoration. It is a statement about what mattered. All findings indicate habitation only during the pre-pottery Neolithic period, 9,500 to 6,400 BC, probably concentrated between 8,500 and 8,000 BC. Karahan Tepe sits within the Taş Tepeler initiative, a Turkish government-backed program spanning at least 12 Neolithic sites in Şanlıurfa province, with investment around $14 million to expand excavations across up to 30 sites. Turkey hopes to attract 5 million visitors annually. Lee Clare of the German Archaeology Institute observed that every building studied gives a glimpse into someone's life, and every layer excavated brings us closer to an individual. The mainstream theory identifies Karahan Tepe as a complex hunter-gatherer society that developed monumental architecture, sedentism, and symbolic culture independently of agriculture. The archaeological alternative frames it as part of a network of ritual centers functioning as a regional religious system, with a deliberate burial suggesting cyclical ritual practice rather than abandonment. The fringe interpretation argues the astronomical alignments, the scale, and the intentional burial suggest a civilization with knowledge systems far beyond what hunter-gatherers are credited with, possibly preserving pre-catastrophe knowledge. 95% of the site remains underground. What has already been found has forced a rewrite of when and why humans first settled down. Now, step back from the individual sites. Look at all 10 together. At least 6 feature deliberate astronomical alignments. Vera Island marks midwinter sunset. Masuda-no-Iwafune marks the spring agricultural season. Nabta Playa tracks the summer solstice and possibly Orion. Karahan Tepe holds the oldest winter solstice alignment. The Pantelleria Vecchia alignment is debated. Baalbek is linked to Phoenician solar worship. Celestial observation appears across continents, across millennia, in cultures with no known contact. Abandonment or deliberate burial recurs. The unfinished obelisk cracked and was left. Masuda-no-Iwafune may have been overturned. Karahan Tepe was ritually buried. Baalbek's forgotten stone was covered by sediment. These builders accepted that not every project would survive. None of the 10 sites has a surviving written record from its builders describing construction methods. Not one. The scale paradox is striking. The largest stones at Gornaya, Shoria, and Baalbek are found in regions with no known megalithic building tradition of comparable scale. There are no smaller practice stones, no evolutionary steps visible in the record. The precision without tools problem surfaces repeatedly. No tool marks at Masuda-no-Iwafune, no cut marks on Al-Naslaa's split faces. Dolerite pounding as the only confirmed method at Aswan. Sacred sites built by societies with no evidence of agriculture appear at Vera Island, Bada Valley, Karahan Tepe, and Nabta Playa. The geographic spread covers Russia, Japan, the Mediterranean, Siberia, Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, Indonesia, Egypt, and Turkey. No single region, climate, or cultural tradition accounts for all of them, and water connects many of them. Lake Turgoyak, the drained Lake Masuda, the submerged Mediterranean site, seasonal flooding at Nabta Playa, Nile transport for obelisks. Multiple sites feature carved animal imagery, bulls and wolves at Vera Island, ibexes and horses at Naslaa, cattle burials at Nabta Playa, vultures and attacking beasts at Karahan Tepe, wildlife reliefs at Bada Valley. The diversity of stone types, granite, sandstone, calcerudite, limestone, means there was no single megalithic technology. Each site adapted technique to available material. Mainstream explanations differ by site, but share a common framework: organized labor, practical motivation, generational effort. Fringe theories also share a framework: lost civilization, suppressed technology, pre-catastrophe knowledge. They diverge on specifics. The archaeological middle ground, where most new evidence is pushing, holds that pre-agricultural societies were far more sophisticated than previously imagined. Karahan Tepe and Nabta Playa are the strongest evidence for this position. Modern neglect ties many sites together. Vera Island has suffered uncontrolled tourism damage. Bada Valley receives minimal international attention. Gornaya Shoria has never had formal excavation. The Pantelleria Vecchia monolith is inaccessible underwater. Climate change has erased evidence at multiple sites. Desertification at Nabta Playa, sea level rise at Pantelleria Vecchia, glaciation at Gornaya, Shoria. The builders of these sites had one thing in common. They invested enormous effort in projects that serve no obvious survival purpose. That suggests symbolic, religious, or astronomical motivation. Correlation across sites does not prove connection. But the patterns demand investigation. So why do we not know more? The structural reasons are concrete, not conspiratorial. Almost no English-language primary research existed on Vera Island until 2019. Masuda-no-Iwafune remains almost unknown outside Japan due to language barriers. Gornaya Shoria has never received formal excavation. Only 5% of Karahan Tepe has been excavated despite its significance. The Pantelleria Vecchia monolith requires specialized diving equipment and dedicated funding for every visit. Academic specialization creates silos. A marine geologist studying the Sicilian Channel is unlikely to cross-reference Indonesian megaliths or Turkish pillar sites. The Unfinished Obelisk, despite heavy tourist traffic, functions more as an attraction than an active research site. The Pantelleria Vecchia debate stalled because no definitive follow-up has been funded. Turkey's $14 million Taş Tepeler investment is a rare exception. Most of these sites receive nothing comparable. The absence of artifacts, tool caches, or quarry sites at many locations makes standard archaeological methods difficult to apply. Climate has erased evidence at multiple sites. The viral fame of Naslaa has not produced published scientific studies. The pre-agricultural paradigm of civilization made it difficult for decades for scholars to take non-farming monumental builders seriously. Colonial disruption interrupted the living tradition in Bada Valley, and some fringe interest in these sites actively discourages mainstream engagement. Researchers fear association with pseudo-archaeology. The net result is a global collection of monolithic sites where the most basic questions, who, when, how, why, remain unanswered, not because the answers are unknowable, but because the investigations have not been done. The sites that have received sustained professional attention, Karahan Tepe, Baalbek, Aswan, have produced the most transformative results. Funding, not mystery, is the bottleneck. What the stones do tell us about human capability is significant. The Forgotten Stone of Baalbek proves ancient quarriers could isolate and prepare monoliths that would challenge modern logistics. The Unfinished Obelisk's Dolerite method at 5 mm per hour shows that ancient engineering was about patience and organization as much as technology. Nabta Playa's summer solstice alignment predates any comparable system in Egypt. That knowledge required generations of observation. Karahan Tepe's community without agriculture proves monumental construction does not require farming surplus. The Pantelleria Vecchia monolith's 300-meter transport confirms Mesolithic quarrying and logistics capability over 9,000 years ago. Masuda-no-Iwafune's 800-ton shaping without identifiable tool marks suggests techniques we have not yet reconstructed. Megalith 1 at Vera Island, with its corridors, chambers, windows, and 17-ton capstones, represents architectural planning comparable to much later European structures. The Bada Valley Kalambas, unique in Southeast Asia, suggests independent innovation. The trilithon at Baalbek was not just moved but raised 18 to 20 feet. The vertical dimension compounds the challenge. These sites collectively demonstrate that the human capacity for monumental construction predates writing, metalworking, and agriculture by thousands of years. The builders used local materials in every case. They adapted. The absence of tool marks at some sites does not necessarily imply advanced technology. It may imply techniques, abrasion, water, sand, that leave no marks. The deliberate burial at Karahan Tepe suggests the buildings had lives of their own. Several sites show projects abandoned mid-execution, revealing the risk inherent in working at this scale. The geographic isolation of many sites suggests the builders deliberately chose remote locations. The range of dates from 10,000 BCE at Karahan Tepe to the 7th century AD at Masuda-no-Iwafune shows this impulse persisted across millennia and cultures. Three frameworks compete to explain the evidence. The mainstream framework cites organized labor by known societies using available tools motivated by religion, astronomy, or social cohesion. Its strengths are clear. It accounts for most evidence at most sites. It requires no unknown technologies. It aligns with experimental archaeology. Its weaknesses are equally clear. It cannot explain the absence of transport infrastructure at Baalbek. It cannot account for the missing tool marks at Masuda-no-Iwafune. It cannot resolve the demographic anomaly at Vera Island. The revisionist archaeological framework argues that pre-agricultural and Mesolithic societies were far more capable, organized, and knowledge-rich than previously believed. Karahan Tepe and Nabta Playa are its flagship evidence. It requires no unknown technologies. It is gaining mainstream acceptance, but it still struggles with the extreme scales at Baalbek and possibly Gornaya Shoria, and with the absence of comparable evidence in many regions. The fringe framework proposes a lost civilization with advanced technology that existed before a catastrophic event. It provides a unified explanation for global patterns, astronomical alignments, and seemingly impossible engineering. Its appeal is obvious. Its weakness is equally obvious. No physical evidence of such a civilization has been found beyond the stones themselves. No tools, no cities, no writing, no DNA. These frameworks are not mutually exclusive at every site. A stone can be both a natural formation and a culturally significant landmark. Naslaa may be exactly that. The revisionist framework is effectively a bridge. It accepts mainstream methods but reaches conclusions closer to fringe timelines. The evidence from Karahan Tepe has moved ideas once considered fringe, like pre-agricultural monumental construction, firmly into mainstream acceptance. Intellectual honesty requires holding multiple hypotheses open when data is insufficient. For most of these sites, data is insufficient. The next generation of research tools, LiDAR, underwater robotics, ancient DNA, satellite imagery, may resolve debates that current methods cannot. The strongest position is to demand more investigation, not to prematurely close questions. Every site in this survey involves the same fundamental physics: gravity, friction, leverage, the fracture properties of stone. No site required materials that were not locally available. The innovation was always in method, not material. Astronomical alignment required only patience, observation, and memory. The laws of celestial mechanics have not changed. What separates these builders from us is not intelligence but context. They solved problems we have never faced with tools we would never choose. The stones are still here, still measurable, still available for study. The only thing missing is the will to look.